videos, and I'm like, huh, I wonder what this is going to be about. I'm like, it's about me, for goodness sake. Hello everybody, welcome back to Commonwealth Flipper. Today I get to do something that I never ever do, and I'm excited about it. I get to respond to another YouTuber and use their name, call them out if you will. And this one's going to be fun. And the reason I'm doing it is because there is a point that I tried to make a long time ago that I think is really, really important for a lot of people, not just in reselling, but just in general for people. And I don't think I did a very good job of it. And I'm going to give it another shot today as I respond to this. Plus there's some sales. Let's go take a look. All right, this is gonna be a different video. So I went to Florida. I'm gonna hit this topic and do a bunch. I only have 6 things that I'm actually physically gonna pull today, because when I was gone, I went to Florida for like 4 days to visit a friend, and my family went. It was a family vacation with a little bit of picking. There's a few things from that trip that I think are gonna be relevant to this, but I'm going to talk about this today, and then at the very end of the video, I'm going to look at the things that just shipped for me while I was gone, which is really, really awesome. So I came back after those 4 days to like 30 sales or so, but the first couple days of that just shipped out stuff, so we did okay. Anyway, here is the video. We'll talk about who said it, and I'm going to make a couple comments before we get into it, and then what I said versus what he said. And I think what you'll find is there's really no contradiction here whatsoever. It's really people in different places at different times that need to, it's something I focus on a lot here. Really make decisions based on where you're at with all kinds of different circumstances. All right, this is what the description of the video says. I was watching Kevin Commonwealth Flipper's video, latest video, and this has been a while now. And something he said compelled me to make this video. This message is to the reseller who is easily influenced. Be careful of the advice that any YouTuber gives you, including myself. Always consider your own circumstances to determine if the advice being given by an influencer is going to work for your business model and your current situation, financial, logistics, etc. As always, check out the video and comment your thoughts below. And there's a bunch of comments. We're going to get into this. But this is from my buddy John. This is John Flippin' Ain't Easy. I have tremendous respect for John, always have. He runs a great business. He does really well. And he gives good advice. I think in this scenario, I think the issue that was had was the clarity of my video wasn't necessarily... I haven't even gone back and watched my old video. Maybe the clarity didn't differentiate why this is okay for some folks and why it's not okay for other folks. If you do watch me all the time, I always make those points. And so I'm going to use this video to actually make that point. But there's one bigger point that I think is much more important than all of this. So we're going to get into that. I'm going to pull an item really quick. Like I said, I do have 6 items that I'm going to pull. While we're talking about this, let's grab one. This first one actually makes the point when we get into it. I think it'll make more sense. This is not a huge flip. I buy these old metal lunch boxes all the time. This one happened to be painted over, and people like them for whatever reason. I usually won't pay more than $1 for them because they don't go for much. It's sold for $14.95 plus shipping. So $1 into $14.95 plus shipping, which of course it's going to be fees in there for, let's see, I'll probably make $11 profit on that, maybe a tick more. By the way, I have talked to John about this. We've had a couple disagreements over the years, actually. But this is the kind of stuff I love. Yeah, I always say that, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And there was some comments in his video that didn't make me terribly happy, because they just simply aren't what I do in here. And I really, truly believe that there are different paths for different people. There are different models. This all stemmed from a video where I talked about a $100 buy that I should easily and quickly be able to turn into $225 or $220. And that's where it started. And I made the argument, like I always do, about the hourly wage. And in this case, that is a heck of an hourly wage on just 2 items to flip that, in my opinion, will go very, very quickly. And somebody chastised me in my comment section on that video, be like, I only buy at 10%. That's it. I won't pay more than 10% of an item. And I said, I get it. But there is a scale to this business, and it is really irrefutable. And I want to go over those things as I talk about this. I didn't slam the person who said 10% is the most I'll pay. I said that's a model that will work, and I have no doubt it works for that person. However, I think that we get so pigeonholed into these different ideologies, I called it dogma in that video, that we're losing perspective, the bigger perspective. This ties into all kinds of things like the argument over live selling. You know, why would you buy something for $2 and sell it for $4? Why would you do these different things? And I'm going to tie all that into this too, but a little glimpse into my mindset. I even brought some props. When you're a teacher and you try to make a point, the bigger point that I'm going to try to make today, and you failed at it before, you turn to props. So I'm going to use these a little bit later in the video for my props right here. 2 little jars that I've had in my house for a long time. Look at that. It says Hanford, California. My mom gave it to me. That's where I was born, even though I don't remember it at all because I was a little baby. And then I don't know what that one is, but it's cool. And John makes quite a few points that you've probably heard me say 100 times. I totally agree with it. This is a beat up old Kavu hat. It's nothing amazing, but I paid $1 for it. It sold for $15.15 plus shipping. So there's $2 spent, by the way. And it should be, well over $20 profit for sure. I think one of the points he makes at the very beginning, because he's talking about, hey, you got to be careful who you listen to. Now, obviously, I look at that and I watch John's videos and I'm like, I wonder what this is going to be about. I'm like, it's about me, for goodness sake. At any rate, I commented on a bunch of stuff in there. I don't know that John watched my full video. I don't know that he watches a ton of my videos, but these are the very points that I've made many, many, many times. I don't try to influence people. I just simply share my story. And a lot of times I'll give different perspectives. And clearly, you know, I'm not opposed to spending 10%. I would prefer to spend less than 10%. I told you the other day in that particular video, I said I will have cost of goods about $25,000 this year, and my gross is going to be, you know, $250,000. That's 10%. Of course, a 10% model can work. I'm just simply making an argument that there is a scale to that. I have no problem. If I'm going to sell an item for $15, you better believe I'm not paying more than $2 for it, maybe $3, but I prefer to pay $1. But there's a sliding scale to it, and I think this, if we get outside of the reselling genre here, this makes a whole lot of sense to a whole lot of people. You know, I know people, I'm not going to mention their names. Some of you may actually know these people. They have a bit of a name in social, not social media, just in media. I know a couple of people who spend between $3 and $5 million a year on cost of goods. And they bring home about $400,000 net profit. They buy houses. They buy houses and they redo them. And like I said, some of you may know these folks. And I'm sorry, that's not 10%. That's nowhere near 10%. You're spending $3 to $5 million a year and you're bringing home a net profit of $400,000. That is an unbelievable living. So if you get outside of the reselling part of the business, think about investors out there. There are people who make a living investing in the stock market who are investing tens of millions of dollars a year for $200,000 net income. So like I said, there's this sliding scale, and I've always put it into place. And the thing that equals things out for me is how much time do you put into an item? Whether that's storage, we've talked about it 100 times. How much storage do you have? How long do you think that item? You can't guarantee it. But if you do this long enough, you got a pretty good idea. Like, for instance, those Barbies I talked about the other day. By the way, I'm not selling them because I'm making a trade with a Barbie expert who will get more money for them. And I'm going to pull in merchandise for something else that I'm planning. But I could list those right now. I could list those right now at a price that they would sell before the end of this video. And I could make a pretty decent hourly profit on them. I'm not going to do it, but I could. Y'all, I'm so excited. My AC just turned on that this sold because I considered delisting it not long after I listed it because we're turning this room into a shipping area for our live sales. And I'm like, I don't know how long it's going to take to sell, but I'm glad I didn't. I made a bunch of money off of this deal already. You've heard me talk about the Play Family Castle. I mean, if you find the dragon from this set right here in perfect condition, it'll go for as much as this, and you're dealing with a small item. But it's still, I bought it as a big bundle. I'm like, I'm not going to turn down the money. $39 plus shipping on this. It's not that hard to ship. That box right there, we'll slide it in, we'll pat it up, it'll be out of here in 5 minutes. All right, I feel like I need to be fair to John. John's always been fair to me. Like I said, we agree 99% of the time on stuff. And I don't feel like he was unfair to me in this video either. However, I think there are some points that need to be made. So his point, the best I can, John, I'm sure you're watching this, is that, hey, if you got $100, you know, and you can buy, I don't remember what you said, 15, 20 items or whatever that are going to make you this or this or this, and you know, you turn that 100 into 700, then you're going to do far, far better. I don't disagree at all. I agree 100%, of course. However, there's an assumption I believe being made here that is an assumption that I hope a lot of people can break out of over time. And it may take some people time. So there are some people, if that's the only $100 you got to invest in merchandise, then absolutely 100% of the time. And that's the point he was trying to make here. You got to figure out where you're at in your position, because if I had $100, when I first started yard sailing, I would take literally $100 out to go yard sailing. And if that was my only $100, I'm not spending it on 1 or 2 items to turn into 200 or 225. Not doing it, because I need bigger bang for my buck. However, my goal was to increase that $100 that I was taking out to 200. And I did. And I'll tell you how I did it. And then to 4. And then to 6. And then to 8. And to get to a position where you're not just doing those no-brainer flips, but you're adding on to it. And really, in some ways, creating different businesses, which I want to get into as well. And that's the main point that I want to get to. But let's look at this point. I don't think we have a disagreement. I think 99% of people out there would much, much prefer turning 100 into 700, obviously, even if it's more work, right? All of this has to depend on a few things. One of those things is, how much merchandise do you currently have? How quickly do you need the money back? Is there more streams of revenue? In other words, is there $1,000 sitting in there that you could source from? Is there 10,000 you can source from, where you can still do all those other deals and do this one as well on top of it, and say make a $60, $80 profit in a day or 2 days? These are all things that are individual to you or to me or to whoever's selling out there. And by the way, John, they also do a podcast, what is it called? Profit Playbook podcast. And they debate these things, and they don't all agree. And certainly John and me don't need to agree either. This is something I think that's constructive, the argument. It gives perspective. I do take exception to some people in the comments who were saying a few things. I'll mention those really quick. These two right here. So these are slot cars, y'all. I'm into these. I've already made my money back on everything I bought that day. Just made a ton of money off of these sales. So I'm literally into these for, I don't even know, not very much. I didn't even know they were in the deal. I thought they were Hot Wheels when I was looking at them. Then realized they're slot cars, and I'm like, holy moly. So we're into these for next to nothing. This one sold for $22.95 plus shipping. This one sold for $24.95. plus shipping. I mean, you want to talk about margins here. That is some amazing margins. Nobody here is going to argue that paying 10% for something is a bad thing. That is not the argument I'm making at all. But that's a pretty good sale. That's almost, what, $25, $47, $48 plus shipping. So we're going to look at a couple of these comments, but I want to say one more thing first, because I've chatted with John over text about this, and he's like, you got to understand, I see people all the time that are watching my channel that are new to reselling, or they're struggling with reselling, and he looks at their stores and they're constantly paying too much for merchandise, essentially. And they're early on in the beginning stages, and I just am afraid that people see what you say like that, and they're going to think 100 into 200 is a good deal, or 220. That's not what I preach. It's never what I preach. But what I do preach, I don't even say preach. If you watch this, by the way, a lot of people came to my defense on this topic I'm talking about right there. Emily says, Kevin constantly tells viewers, this is what I do. It may not work for you. Maria says, I never compare myself to anyone. And if I recall, Kevin has always said, it might work for you, not always work for you. He just shares what he does. And that's the case. Obviously, if I could buy things for 20 bucks and sell them for $2.20, I would do it. But because I have working capital at this point, I can do both. I can do both, and you can make that judgment call based on, for me, it's based on the ease of selling. If I see comp selling at $200 for one of the Barbies and $50 to $100 on the other one, comp selling at that price, then I know for a fact, I mean, that's $300 right there. If I list them well under market, I'm going to get $225 for them, and it's going to go quickly. I'm not just talking about any run-of-the-mill Barbie. I wouldn't do this on a run-of-the-mill Barbie. I'm talking about stuff that I'm just from selling for a long time. I know it's going to sell. Matter of fact, there's a point that goes to that. Silver Hair Stacker, met you. You're a terrific guy. He says, it all depends on perspective. For example, if I came across a deal to buy 1-ounce gold coins at $2,500 each, he says he would draw out all of his saving, sell the cars, take out a home mortgage loan, and borrow from my kids' inheritance because I know I could flip them for $3,500 each in an instant. So in that scenario, I make $1,000. I make $100,000 on 100 coins in one day. Is that not a good flip? I think that's the point I'm trying to make. There is a scale to this. Think about people who sell used cars, for goodness sake. You buy a used car for $15,000 and you sell it for $21,000. That's not 10%, but their whole business model is based on that. There is a scale to this. The housing example I gave you, where they're investing $3 to $5 million a year, rotating that money in. And here's the big point I'm going to make. I'm going to use that analogy to make this point in a little bit with my common experience. Because yes, he's absolutely right. There's a lot of people out there that are on a shoestring budget to buy. And if that's the case, you better make good decisions and you better buy low. But I think there are different business models that can be incorporated and your scalability can be much greater in the long run if you employ just a few simple little things. One last thing is people talked about advice that I give. I really don't give much advice on here. I simply present different things and I show people what I do. And I do always say, you've got to act in your own best interest and figure out where your sweet spot is. But there's one thing that we should all be hoping to, well, not all of us, but most of us should be hoping to attain. And that is, you know, I have a buddy who goes out and he will bring the smallest amount of cash with him possible in order to motivate himself to find the very best items at the cheapest prices and only sell those. I'm not opposed to that model at all. I just think that the goal should be to have an operating budget that is growing over time to enable yourself, if you so choose, and if your situation calls for it, to make much bigger purchases and to make much bigger profits and to constantly be increasing that. And that's why I brought these out for as an example here. This is not some guy on YouTube who's just spouting off and, you know, because I make money on whatever and I've got money to do this now. This is somebody who's employed tactics like this my entire life when I made no money. These jars represent something to me. I don't have to do this anymore, but I still do it. These jars used to be all the money I would put every time we had money, any kind of change. My wife would put them in here, my kids would put it in here, and we would fill these jars up. We would go on vacation once a year. By the way, a vacation that my in-laws paid half of. I'm bringing 5 people, my whole family, and they're paying half of this trip. But it was tight. I didn't make much money. And so our spending money had to have a limit on it. And it was all the change we could accumulate over the course of the year. That was our spending money when we went to the beach, where we could go out and play arcade games and do all the fun stuff and let my kids do stuff. I don't have to do that anymore. I still do it. Now the kids still like it and they still put it in here because we take this money and we put it in their savings accounts at the end of the year. But I make that point just to say that I've been in all these situations. I've been in situations where I knew I had a bill coming up. You know, you go back 15 years, man, I was making nothing. I was depending on this money from selling on eBay literally to get me through the month. But I employed a couple things that helped me grow past that. And of course, you know, when social media kicked up, I actually did this exact same model, but I do it in social media. It'll tie into some of the things you've been hearing me say. And I'm hoping I can make this point. So that was, you know, we'd end up with a few $100s in change every year because I basically try to get change places. and we'd go have fun with it. And I knew it was money that was put aside for that point. And I didn't mind giving the kids, $40 to go waste in an arcade or something. I remember going out to a yard sale right after, to a Saturday, I was going to do some yard sales, where my wife knew we needed some money. It was a car repair. And there was probably enough for the car repair. And she's like, maybe you shouldn't go out this week. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go out and I'm going to take this amount of money out there. And boy, was I super careful that week. And I knew I had to get something that would return that money very quickly. But I didn't want to always be in that situation. And so I've always employed something that I think is helpful. People might be surprised. I have 7 different bank accounts. 7. 4 of them, well, if you count the PayPal one, 4 of them have to do with my reselling business. There is an operating account where all the money goes into. Out of that account, I pay myself a certain amount. And I make sure that amount, I have to push myself to make sure that I have enough to pay myself out of that account. I still do this to this day. And you might be surprised how little I pay myself because of how much I believe in the next part of this. I do have a PayPal account as well that is mixed with some social media and stuff, but I'm going to leave that out of it right now. I have a savings account that is dedicated to capital expenditures for growth, for things like, a trailer, for things like I want to buy a van, for things like my second trailer, for things like this shed, which thank goodness I was able to plow money from the Inaman into this. All those kind of things. Big purchases that are not going to be recouped like that. They're investments into the future. This third account is really where the key is. And I've done this for years and years. Back when I was making maybe $20,000 net profit a year, $30,000 net profit a year, I would take a percentage of what I sold, and I knew I was making profit on it. It was 5%. So if I sold an item for $20, one of those dollars got put into this expenditure account because I didn't want to be hamstrung by the fact that I'm taking $100 out every week and I have to turn that into X. And then I have to pay myself all the profit out of it. I would take 5% of the gross number and put it in that account, and it would build up over time. And so once it got up to a certain amount of money, I would start taking $200 out. Got up to a certain amount, I would start taking $400 out. Got up to a certain amount, I would start taking $600, $800 out. I just went on this trip to Florida, for instance, and I had $1,200. I didn't spend it all, but I had $1,200 just in case I needed it. And that's, I think, where the difference is. If you're working with a static $100, then yes, absolutely everything that John said to you in that video is 100% correct. I don't disagree with it at all. I think a lot of people need to move past that and to start getting their money, at least get in the process of creating a third business account. And I've said this for a long time. Some people don't even have a real business account. They don't even know what they're making money and then they extract it and use it for whatever and then they got to go do it again. And that's fine if that's what you're doing. But if you're trying to turn it into a business, you want to get your, I don't know what you want to call that account, but to me, it's a cost of goods account that I want to increase over time. If you're having success in reselling, take a portion of that back out. Not just the amount to reinvest in your business, make it static, but to grow that amount. And I want to make another point here. Before I started social media, well, I'll tell you in a minute. This was a throw-in, so you know me. I'm not opposed to selling small things, especially if they make me happy. This is a die-cast Fozzie Bear from the Muppet Show. This was an add-on, so I essentially got it free at an estate sale. And I sold it for $7.95 plus shipping. So there'll be people out there like, oh, you make this money on social media, yeah, so you can go out and spend whatever. Okay, that's fine. Don't use it as a cop-out because before I started social media, I had built that operating budget where I could tap into it if an opportunity came up. I had already brought it over $6,000, and that was when I made nothing. I made nothing, y'all. I was a teacher. I said this 100 times. The most I ever made as a teacher, baseball coach, and bus driver was just over $42,000. That was the most I ever made. So I know a person. I know a couple people who have never made on their primary job over $55,000 in a year, who are millionaires. It just takes the little step of setting something up and keeping track of your numbers and putting a little bit into that account systematically. You know, whatever percentage. Maybe it can be 10%. Maybe you're doing this for fun and whatever, and you don't have to pay yourself a ton. To this day, y'all, to this day, I pay myself $32,000 a year reselling. That's all I pay myself. That's the most I've ever paid myself. I will make significantly more than that, but I'm taking that amount of money. It's how you control your cost of living, which means you're not just making more money to spend more money. It takes a little bit of discipline, so I still only pay myself that. And as far as the social media goes, I took this same construct and I took the social media and I pay myself so much out of the social media. I have an operating budget for social media. It's how people are like, what are you doing? You know, we gave away. Somebody bought this for $1. I paid for this. It's $550, right? It's like, how do you do that? Does it make sense? It does make sense to me because it's part of my social media operating agenda, my business, if you will. So you start to pay yourself enough to survive out of this business. I have 4 businesses, and I treat each independently, although 2 of them are stuck in one account and 2 of them are in another. But, you know, when I started Dibbed It, I said that I was going to reinvest every dollar I made that first year. And then the second year, I'm going to probably reinvest over half of it. For instance, that right there. That is a reinvestment into it. I don't need that money. So how do you make your money work for you in smart ways? There's all kinds of ways. Obviously, if you're an investor out there, let me give you this little analogy here. So I went down to Florida and I picked with Mike. It was a family vacation, but 2 of the days we picked down there. And I decided that I was going to sell everything that I bought on a live show. Is that the best economic decision? No, but it was for me at the time because I flew down there with my family and there's one particular item and I couldn't leave it behind because I knew if I shipped it back to myself, I'd still make money even shipping it back to myself. But we decided to have a little fun and to go on Dibbed It and sell over there. And it was I paid $100 for this item. There's a couple of them like this. And looking at the numbers, I sold it for $158. Nobody in their right mind would say, yeah, go out and buy a $100 item and sell it for $158. It's not a good business model. But it could be. It could be, depending on the scale and just depending on the volume. I spent a little less than $500. That show, we sold about $1,750 worth of stuff. If it was all listed on eBay, it would have been well over $3,000 to list it on eBay, but I would have had to ship it all back. I would have had to do all kinds of things like that, and I just made the decision because I was gone on vacation, and we're just going to take this little profit, and then I was going to ship 1 box back to myself. I pulled out just enough to ship 1 box back, keep it as a controlled price, and so I spent around $500. I will have over $2,000 of listable merchandise in that 1 box. And then we sold this stuff for $1,750. Now you got to take out shipping, you got to take out fees, which fees aren't that much for me over there. But there's one particular item that might make the point. Here is the next. This was like the leftovers of the slot cars. I put this out there at a really good price. They're just parts and pieces and stuff, but there's probably some decent value in just the tops and stuff, but the bottoms, and I didn't want to deal with it. And I put it out there for a good price, $22, I think. $22.80 plus shipping. So I'm looking at this $100 item actually it was $200 at a garage sale. And I'm like, well, I can't pay $200. And I wouldn't pay $200 even if I was going to flip it on eBay because I don't know how long it would take to sell at the max profit, which is probably around $300, right? That's about what it would go for. $200 and $300, you got to wait. You don't know how long it's going to sell for. But in my mind, I'm thinking, if I pay $100 for this thing, can I get $150 today on a live sale? Because I'm not shipping this thing back with the other stuff. It was a bigger item. And I was like, let's just do it. Let's see what happens. It's not necessarily the best decision. However, I was pretty comfortable thinking it would get around that. I think it sold for $158. So 100 into 158. Most people would be like, that's the dumbest thing in the world. Okay, fine, I get it. But I knew it was going to happen in one day. So with fees and everything, I'll make like $43, $44, $45 or something like that because of the way that's set up over there. And I bought it and I sold it that day and I made that much money on it. And I pretty much knew it would occur almost like that. And this is not an advocate. You know, some other people may not be able to do that because the, you know, live selling or whatever. They may not. But I guarantee you, if you list a $300 item out there and you list it for $200, it's going to sell super quick. So you might be able to think, okay, 100 into 200, it's going to sell in a day or less, minutes maybe. You know, you got to take eBay fees out, which are greater. It's like, you just made a bunch of money in one day. If you have that extra capital, right? That didn't restrict. There was no opportunity cost here. Losing that $100 on that investment didn't cost me the ability to buy the other stuff. And I think that's where the big difference is. And I view that, it's why I've made this argument, by the way, that, you know, live selling to me is a different business. It's a different business. It's why I've tried to prove on here. And I do know I have social media and whatever. I'm not saying live selling is right for everybody. Matter of fact, I specifically say it's wrong for like 95% of people. So, you know, if you have a $100 item sales for that, you've got $44 coming out of it, net profit. If you take 5 of those dollars and take the original 100 and the 5, put it back in your sourcing budget, you have, you know, you've got $105 now to go out and source with instead of 100, and you've got a quick $42 per whatever it is, $40 profit you just put in your pocket. It's why I've said that my eBay business, I didn't want to be one of those, you know, creators that taps into their audience and just sells live. I could do that. It's just not where my heart is. And I also think that, you know, you're not talking to a reselling audience because that's not realistic for most people out there. And a lot of people have gone that way, but I've chosen not to. I've chosen to say, you know what? I'm going to create a new business. My new business is not going to net me the return that my old business is. So I'm going to take all that labor that would go into that new business and I'm going to push it off on somebody else. That's Jess. And she's going to make a living doing it. And I'm going to probably increase my net profit this year because I've decided to create another business by about $20,000 and not decrease my eBay business. I wanted to do this and increase. So in other words, it's allowed me to buy more, to scale my business in the same area that I'm doing it now. I don't want a warehouse. I don't want all those things. Maybe someday, I don't know. I highly doubt it. But you have to, this is why I think John is right? John, limited space, you know, what are you going to do? You can't just go out and make a $50,000 investment in the merchandise because you have the money, because you don't have the space. You don't have the time to do it. So I think all this stuff is really relative to the person. And that's the point he was trying to make, which is what I respect out there. I just want to reiterate that fact. I'm not telling people, go out and buy stuff for $100, sell it for $200. That's not what I'm telling people. What I'm telling people is there can be a space for that business if you have the revolving capital that is increasing in order to do it. I'm currently doing this in 3 businesses. I hope to be doing it in 4. And the 4th business that I hope to start someday, which is, and I missed out on a couple little things. I wanted to buy a tiny little place up the road right here and start to do a little bit of real estate. You want to talk about margins being tiny. You think about the money you got to invest into that to get a little bit out every single month. So it's all, like I said, it's all scalable. It all depends on what scale you're looking at here. My eBay business, for the most part, will be run at about a 10% cost. That's the way it's always been. That's the way I'm just, you know me, I'm cheap. I want to do that. But I'm not going to, you know, hamper myself, hinder myself, handicap myself into not being able to do bigger deals. I would absolutely love Silver Hair Stacker to buy a massive coin deal, because that stuff goes in minutes if you price it right, where you're making smaller margins. But you have to have the capital to do it and the capital not to take away from your other businesses. So Dibbed It for me, of course, the live selling part of it is a separate business. I'm basically running it with Jess. And I'm thrilled to do it, and she's happy to have a job like that. And I'm adding on to my income by doing it that way. But then there's a separate part of the Dibbed It business, which is trying to grow the platform. And so I'm taking money out of what I'm making each month and reinvesting. If you want to know the truth, I've reinvested probably 90% of the money that I've made out of that, and I will continue to do it for a very long time. It has not hampered my other businesses at all because I'm very careful about making sure that that revenue is increasing over time and taking percentages out in order to grow it in the long run. I would love for 10 years from now, 20 years from now, whatever, for that to be paying me back for all that I'm putting into it now. That's what a business is what a business does. My social media business, I've said this for years, I don't expect 10 years from now to be making anywhere near the money I'm making on it now, but I still have an operating budget with it. And, YouTube money is actually down. You talk to a lot of YouTube creators. It's down. I've been fortunate enough that the Facebook has grown so much. We're 525,000 followers over there, which has been very helpful. But you can't just assume growth all the time. And you got to be careful about all these things. But my social media money that I make, a huge portion of that, I have not really reinvested it yet. But I have the ability to do it. Social media wise. I mean, we talk about the trailers and different stuff like that. So hopefully I'll be able to reinvest that someday into something. And if I don't, then maybe I'll turn it into another business. Who knows? But this is the kind of thing that I really think people should do. If you have, everybody should have, I shouldn't say everybody, because there's some people who do this on a very small scale who just like it. But to have a separate business bank account, and then, in my opinion, an additional business account out of there. That is some kind of savings account where you're increasing your ability to have capital expenditures on cost of goods. The first time I was so excited, I had built this account up to well over $1,000 at this point. This is forever ago, y'all. Just taking 5% out of the gross every single month. And I walked into, what was the store? It was like an awards store, they do plaques and medals and glass and engraved stuff. And they had a yard sale sign up. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, all right, I'll go in there. And I went in there, and this guy also owned the next building right next to it. There was a hallway that you could get into it. It was tiny. It was thin. It was like as thin as this room, maybe thinner, but it went back like 40 feet. And he was selling stuff off in there. Somebody had been paying him for storage for years. It was all vintage computer stuff. I wish I could go back then, because back then, that vintage computer stuff in, say, 2002 or 2003 was going for okay money, but it wasn't going for stupid money. I mean, old IBM computer, like first stuff, the Apple Mac, all that early stuff. And I just offered him, because I knew I had that $1,100 or whatever sitting in that account. Like, I can give you $800 for this. And he hemmed and hawed for a while, and he's like, okay. And I was able to make that purchase because I had been so diligent about that. But then it takes more diligence, right? I had to take every dime that I made off of that sale as I made it to reimburse the $800. And then after that, 5% of everything on top of that. By the end of the day, I made a bunch of money on that. And I had an operating account, a buying account that was over $1,200 at that point. And I had made a few $1,000s on that as well. So I really encourage people, if you're trying to grow this business, to increase the amount of capital so you don't lose an opportunity out there that you could use. Maybe it does require getting another building, or who knows, heaven forbid, a storage unit, right? A lot of people do that because they have to. I hate it. I'd rather have a shed, but you get the point. I'm going to make a couple last points, then I'm going to run through all the stuff that sold while I was gone. I saw a few more comments I think are interesting. I watched, this is Mr. Sadie, thank you. And we don't always agree either, but I got a lot of respect for you, just as I do John. So don't take this the wrong way. John is a great resource for resellers, and he has a different model for sure. I watched Kevin's video also, and I also would turn 100 into 225, but it sounds like you're assuming a specific situation, as he was also, only the opposite. And I was assuming a specific situation, but I went on later to make the point that this is for this situation, but you get the point. He's assuming you have an actual operating business with profit and capital coming in already. And sounds like you're assuming this is someone's last $100 for their business and their business hinges on it. And I would argue if your business hinges on $100 to $300 and making sure it comes back in a short amount of time, then you don't have much of a business, basically is what he's saying. And that's the argument that I'm saying. I'm not going to go that far. I think, yeah, it's still a business, right? There's a lot of people out there who are using this to pay their bills every single month out of necessity. I'm not begrudging that at all. Some people are just simply at that point. I was at that point. And it was just that little step of saying, you know what? I don't always want to be at this point, so I'm going to take 5%. So if I spend $100 at garage sales, at the end of that month, there was going to be, or end of the month, so it'd be $400, right? There was going to be $420 returned to that operating budget. It wasn't going to just be $400. And you got to push yourself to get there, and it doesn't seem like much. But, you know, you do that for 10 years, all of a sudden you got an opportunity budget, if you will, that's in the thousands of dollars. And so I eventually raised that. So now it's not 5% anymore. Now it's 10%. And the reality of it is I probably won't ever use that at this point. But you know what it does do once it gets to that point? It's an interest-bearing account. It may not be covering inflation because the interest might be so low on some account like that, but at least it's doing something. So anyway, that was a point I wanted to make, but I absolutely want to make sure that John's argument is very, very relevant, that people are in different situations. And when you're watching my channel, I hope that people get, I'm just simply showing different things. Look, I know people, and they will probably comment in this video, who have been encouraging me to scale my business for a long time, get whatever. That's where the real money is at, and do all that kind of stuff. The massive buyouts and that kind of stuff. I just have chosen not to do that. My reselling business is still mom and pop. It just is. It always will be. But I still want to make that mom and pop part of my business as scalable as I can. And that's what I'm trying to do here. Uh-oh. Dogs are chasing Turner. All right, let me get into these other sales. I'm going to go through them really quick. I don't know if I did this one before, but Adam's Family Cereal Box, Uncle Fester, I think Jess shipped that out while I was gone. $10.46 plus shipping. Scotty Kamen Futura Phantom head cover. Putter head cover, if you remember that one. There's a good example. I paid $25 for this Scotty Cameron putter. I didn't even sell it. I sold it for $1 on Dibdit because that was an investment to me. And I paid $25 for the club and the head cover. I sold the head cover for $59, so I still made money, and I invested that money. It's a process. But if you can live off of a certain amount of money or pay yourself, that's why the necessity of the separate account, I think, is really, really key for people, instead of just doing what I did at the very beginning, which is like, oh, I just spent $100 out here, and now there's, back in the day, PayPal was the thing, right? I was like, I have $240 in my account now, you know, a week later or whatever. And I'm like, oh, sweet. And then I go out and spend that money, and I'm like, oh, this is not sustainable. I want to grow this thing. Anyway, that one sold for $59 plus shipping. I sold a vintage Tennessee t-shirt, and it was around forever. It came from that massive buyout. We did great on it, but that one didn't sell for very much. It's a USSSA softball t-shirt from the 80s. Sold for $7.70 plus shipping. Arctic Tumbler, brand new, 30% off. Sold for $11.87 plus shipping. This one was cool. An FSU snapback hat from 1999. That sold for $24.95 plus shipping. Bath & Body Works Juniper Breeze lotion, $48 plus shipping. Lily Pulitzer stainless steel champagne flute. I paid $1 for this, sold for $20 plus shipping. Vintage Revereware frying pan. I paid $5 for this one. I didn't want to, but I did. And it sold for $30 plus shipping. So that would have been well beyond the 10%, right? But it's like 5 into 30. It'll sell quick. It's in great shape. I'm going to take that profit. Oscar de la Renta. My dad bought this at a sale for a couple of bucks. Perfume or cologne or something. $17.05 plus shipping. ZZ Top hat. I paid $1 for this one. Not a top hat. A ZZ Top hat. $22 plus shipping. Walker Cup hat. It was $1 hat in a giant buyout. Not a huge big deal. $12 plus shipping. Hanes Herway crew neck. This is the stuff that sometimes sits forever. I don't have a problem having stuff sit forever. My model can handle it. For some people, they want to have, and John does this, and he's amazing at it, by the way. If you look at the size of his store compared to the sales, it's crushing me. Crushing me. Another John, Cincinnati Picker, does this as well. There are different models that work. And I honestly think that you have to figure out where you're at for these things. I have no problem with space here, here, and in there. But when I start to have space issues, I start to pull back a little bit and push it to other businesses. At any rate, that crew neck sold for $24.95 plus shipping. Looking forward to seeing it in person. Have a wonderful day and weekend. Kind regards, Sandra. I assume, Sandra, you are a viewer. Thank you. I appreciate that. The octopus that I regretted buying as soon as I bought it sold, and this says a repeat buyer, so this is almost certainly a viewer as well. Thank you for bailing me out of that. That's the kind of thing that, you know, being a creator like this, you do get bailed out from time to time. $49.95 for this giant hammered metal octopus. 4 CD lot, Midwestern Songs, Civil War versus God's Situation. I don't know what this is. Dillinger, $21.80. Vintage American Federation of Musicians pendant, $16 plus shipping. Captain Morgan Coca-Cola rubber bar mats. I bought 4 bar mats for $5. Bar mats stink, man. They take forever. You got to get them cheap. That sold for $16.96 plus shipping. Here you go. My lowest sale in a very long time, and I love it. It makes me happy. It was a quarter at a sale. Nothing there I could buy, and I found 2 things. Everything was destroyed by water, and just, it was expensive, and I was like, but I saw this sitting there. $5.65 for the Tang Lips plus shipping for a quarter, right? So, I mean, that's under 10%. But it's not a very big profit. Is it worth your time? It is for me because I love those things. Milburn Rose by Westmoreland Solid Sterling Silver Butter Knife, $29 plus shipping. Engraved Poly Sterling Butter Knife, RW&S Wallace, $34 plus shipping on that one. Funko Legacy Firefly Washburn Detailed something. I don't know what it is. I don't know what this thing is. $16.95 plus shipping. That was a multi-quantity item. Lego Ninjago Costume, $22.95 plus shipping. Some Asics that I got lucky on. They were just super cheap at a sale, and I bought a bunch of shoes, and that one was a winner. And some of the other ones weren't, but I took the chance and bought it quickly. That one sold for $59 plus shipping. And some Doc Marten white leather boots for $37 plus shipping. Thank you for the offer. I really appreciate it. Keep up the great content. So at least 3 viewer sales here out of this list. And thank you for everything you have taught me. Check out my store, Pickle City Treasures. Pickle City Treasures, Tracy. Thank you very much. All right, a whole video with no dogs, no cats, no kids. And that kind of makes me sad. So we'll make sure we remedy that next time. This is also normally the type video when I'm gone and Jess ships stuff for us. Sometimes my wife is here and she ships it when I'm gone, but we took the whole family this time. That I answer viewer questions. So the next video is going to be pulling an item, answering a question, and I can't wait to answer some of these. You guys are cracking me up out there. I also got, I didn't know this was a thing, but over on CommonwealthPicker.com, apparently there's a monthly subscription that you can buy to CommonwealthPicker.com. Did not even know that existed. Christine is a monthly subscriber to CommonwealthPicker.com for $1 a month. Christine, thank you. I don't know what to tell you. I do have a topic, you know, because we do a portion of all those sales over there to charity, and I've had a lot of questions about that because of what's been going on in a few circles, and so I want to answer that on the next video as well. But a big giant shout out to John, Flippin' Ain't Easy. I highly recommend his channel, and also picking Profit Playbook Podcast. But I also see 2 of my other buddies over here. Scott is also an unbelievable resource at Cha-Ching King, and my good buddy Ray Nashville Flippers. We don't always see eye to eye either, but I have a ton of respect for him. It goes back to that, it's iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Look, I don't know everything. I don't know half of everything, and I never will. And I get so much great advice from you guys out there. I really enjoy talking to you. I used to think, you know, when I'm 55, I'm not ever picking up a camera again, and I'm like, it's become part of my life. I love talking to you guys. I really appreciate it, and obviously reselling has been for a very long time. So thank you for stopping by, and I appreciate you, and I can't wait to see you next time.